Okay, so if you don't want to be recorded, then just keep quiet, but you can still ask questions in the comments. All right, Rob says, from Peachland in Okanagan Valley in BC. And Taryn, oh hi Taryn. Both in Peachland, yeah. So as I mentioned, there's a couple people that are sharing the same watershed, which I think is really nice. Okay, how do I share my screen? I'll just get you guys to mute yourself if you wouldn't mind. There's a little bit of noise. I think it's from you, Joanne. I don't know if you can hit mute. Awesome. Share. You see it? Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to play my little presentation. As you guys knew from the application, this is a project funded by the WWF Watershed, the Water Fund with Loblaws. And the really cool thing about WWF is that they're using the test kits at their offices now too. So you guys are part of this great movement that we have with WWF. They really believe in citizen science to connect people to waterways. But you're probably wondering, how did Water Rangers start? So this is me and my dad, and he's been doing the water testing on our lake in Val-des-Monts, which is just north of Ottawa, since 2003. And he goes out when the ice goes out, because what's happening at that point is the lake is mixing. So we take a sample from the viewable portion. So we find out what the Secchi depth, which we'll talk about a bit more, but the water clarity is. And then we take a little bit of water from every level with a technique, a citizen science technique. Now, I'm a web designer. That's where my background is, actually in web design. And I lived in England for 9 years. And when I came back and started doing water testing with him again, I realized he didn't know what the results meant. Were they good? Were they bad? He also had them all in a filing cabinet. And I found out that this is very common for people collecting water samples, that it's really difficult for them to share. A lot of organizations spend a lot of time managing their data, and it means that they're not working on the things that they want to do and engaging the public. So in this case, we wouldn't get our results back for about 3 or 4 months, just because a lot of these organizations are really underfunded. And so that moment of connection and understanding wasn't there. So as a UX designer, I came up with an idea for how I could transform this experience to make it more real-time so that people could participate, put data in, and understand the data. And this was the first ever paper prototype of Water Rangers. And I participated with my co-founder Mark and Ollie in a thing called Aqua Hacking, which started in 2015. So we were the first year's participants, and we were the winners. And the idea was to create a system for the Ottawa River, for the volunteers there to have a place to put their citizen monitoring data, but also to bring in other data from different sources. So in this case, it was the City of Ottawa data. But after that finished, realized that I didn't know how people were testing, and I didn't understand what needed to be done. So luckily, I made friends with the conservation authorities and other groups who taught me about sampling techniques that they've been doing for years, how they collect data, what was important. And then I took those things to create test kits and go out with volunteers. And this is Guy McLeod, who is on Charlotte Lake in Ontario. And he's been a citizen science for ages, but he's been doing Water Rangers as well for a couple of years now. and on his lake, the Conservation Authority does testing, but they can't test every year because of capacity issues. So he provides the in-between monitoring. And he also has been doing temperature data since 1983 on a weekly basis. And to me, this was one of the most powerful stories of collaboration and of citizen science. You know, he's been testing since 1983, and he's been very consistent on how he tests. And he's actually saw that there has been an increase, same as what we're seeing with climate change. So there's lots of really cool ways that you can use Water Rangers as a complement to other water monitoring programs. And the test kit actually came because we'd created this platform for organizations to use, but there was a lot of citizens that didn't have a space to actually do the testing themselves. So the platform itself is a data platform, and you can see it's being used in pockets around Canada, and then a big location spot is actually in Alabama and Florida, where we have partners. And then we're also moving into Brazil this year with some researchers from France to get water data and build capacity in the Amazon. So when you create an observation, you get this observation report, and then you have these little question marks everywhere, as you can see next to them. And what we're trying to do is give explanations that we hope anyone can understand. Grade 5 reading level is how we try and target it. And we're really trying to answer questions that most citizens have, and they've told me what their questions are. What does it mean? Why is it important? And how can I test for this if you can? And if not, where could maybe testing occur? So a lot of the tests require a lab. And so you'll see with the test kit, we've limited what we test for because we really want it to be meaningful and for you to be able to get results right away. So as you continue on in the summer, you're going to start seeing little trend maps on your locations as you enter that data, which is really great. And as you can see on our cottage site here, we've also entered in the phosphorus, which is lab testing, alongside our citizen monitoring data. You guys can be part of the Water Rangers group if you don't have your own monitoring group. However, if you are part of a bigger community organization, we highly recommend that you set up your own group. Let me know and we'll help you set that up. And then you can actually create the form in the order that you want. The form default is based on the Water Rangers test kit. But if you have additional equipment, you can adjust your form, as you can see on the right-hand side there, to match those sorts of parameters. There's also issue reporting, and this is what our friends in the States are using quite a lot. So if you do notice issues, you can report it and create a timeline. Oftentimes it's just us here, so we try and connect with local governments to help answer these questions. But more and more, as we come into more regions, we want those organizations and individuals to have connections to groups so that this process can happen more automatically, where we don't get frustrated calling around to different offices to let them know when spills are happening, so we can actually inform the public what's happening. And we also have an app that is for Android and Apple. We're releasing a new version quite soon. This is just for data collection though, but it does work when you're offline. So you can collect your data in the field without an internet connection, stores it on the phone, and when you return to civilization, you can upload them. So you can see the little offline mode there. So we're going to look at the new website in a second, and then we're going to look at the test kit and go through that, and then talk a little bit more about the study. So let's go back to top share. If you guys have any questions, feel free to just put them in the questions. Okay. So should we? I think maybe we'll do the test kit first, and then is my video going? Can you guys see me? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, there I am. All right. Okay. So if you have your kit with you, you can follow along. If you haven't received your kit yet, it should be coming shortly. If you haven't received a notification from Canada Post, let us know. It's been pretty hectic here. The bags arrived late, so we've been pretty swamped getting all this stuff done, haven't we? Yeah. Okay. So you can see I've got the Portuguese one. That's for Brazil. So we'll look in the front pocket first, and there's a few things in here. Now, we give you two options for collecting data because it depends on where you are, honestly, and it depends on your own preferences, how you like to collect. I personally like to do a combination of collecting. I write stuff down in my notepad, and this paper is waterproof, but it's also recyclable. So it is paper. It's made by Write in the Rain. It's pretty awesome. And we have attached your pen to your notepad because Najib and I were out on the lake testing, and I lost my pen how many times? Lots of times. So we know that trying to do all the things and then recording it can be tough. So you'll notice in the notepad here that you have the core things that we want you to record. And then on the back, there's some space for notes because notes are actually really important for context as well. So if you start with your date and time, the body of water. So if you're on Lake Ontario, saying Lake Ontario is not specific enough, but for smaller water bodies that you don't need to add the location name as well. So the body of water is a required field, but the location name is not. So be as specific as you can. When you're recording the new locations, we like you to record details about it, and it's written in your field guide what we like you to record. But things like, is there flowing water? How, what's the bank made of? Is there lots of wildlife plants? Is it very urban? And how safe it is to, confirming? Yes, you can. Yeah, of course. Yes, we're recording this. So Rob, you can share this webinar with others. So yeah, so the location description is really important. And also where you're sampling at that location should be recorded in there too. So if you're at a little pond, take a photo of, if you're near a certain tree, landmarks are really important. We have the weather right now and the weather in the last 24 hours. In the last 24 hours, especially important if you had a rain event, that can really affect water chemistry. You could have pollutants in the water caused by runoff. So we really want to know that and how it's affected your readings. Then we have air temperature, water temperature, conductivity, dissolved oxygen. And over here you have your test strips, chlorine, pH, alkalinity, and hardness. And then at the bottom we have our water clarity or depth. So we'll go through each of those tests one by one. And we also include a waterproof, I call it splash proof, please don't go swimming with these, phone case. And what's great about this is if you are recording on the app, I just can drop it and then pick it back up to keep recording. And you can actually tap through the bag. In your bag as well, we have some complimentary information. Oftentimes when you start testing, and please tell me about this if it happens, but oftentimes people ask you what you're doing. And maybe you don't know, but you have these cards here which give you some explanations, and feel free to, you can hand them out, and if you'd like more, we can mail more to you. We include some stickers and some badges. These are great if you're going with kids. And if you need a couple more, please let us know. We can mail some out to you. They're really great prizes. Usually after I teach kids water testing, we do some skill testing questions where they have to answer one correctly to earn their status as a water ranger. There's my business card in there. It has my phone number on it too. If you have an urgent thing, Najeeba is going to be your primary contact over email, but she's not working every day. She's you know, has to have her life too. But if it is urgent and you have a problem, you feel free to email me or phone me. And if I don't answer, I'll get back to you right away. We also have a magnet for you, which has the testing day. So our first official testing day will be June 30th. However, you may decide that you want to do weekly testing, and then you'll set your date and your protocol on your profile. We include a little bit of literature from some of the products that we have. You don't need them, but it's good to have in case you want to sort of delve deeper. We are running a program to try and see if we can read test strips. So if you'd like to participate in this, as part of your observation, take a photo of your test strip on here, and then we'll be able to compare them to the results that you had, as well as what the machine learning model predicts, to see if we can use this as a technique going forward to do that. And then the last thing we have here is a new thing we're starting this year, which is test strip recycling. It's an envelope. At the end of the season, mail it back to us. We're coming up with a way to use the test strips in a fun way. So that's the boring part. Now, oh, can you get some water? Yeah. Inside your case, this is a new case for this year. And you'll have a space for your cup at the top. In here you have some gloves and some Whirlpack bags, and I'll explain what we're going to use those for in a bit. And then you have a little container, and this is like your field collection for your test strips. So we'll keep those up there. And then back down here, you'll see that there's little cubbies for the various things. And this is new for this year. We had the same stuff last year, but the bag was a little bit harder to pack up. It was a little bit smaller. So we've redesigned the bag this year to make it super easy for people. Now I can't demo this one, so I'm just gonna show you. This is what we call a Secchi disc. And a Secchi disc is been used for about 200 years to measure water clarity. Now, how you use it is you make sure you have your hand in the handle. You lower it into the water until you cannot see it anymore. And then the technique is actually to raise it and lower it till you find that perfect spot where it disappears. Then you grab the rope at the water, not where you're sitting up in a boat or on the dock standing. It has to be right at the water. This year we have a measuring tape. In previous years we've had a rope with some markers on it, so it'll be easier for you to read it. And then you record it in meters. So if it's, say this was the depth, say it's not very clear at all, this is 0.4. So 40 centimeters would be 0.4. Najeeba will be checking over your observations, especially as they first come in, to make sure that that you're doing stuff right, so we can catch errors early. Can you grab the field guide too? Yeah, because I left it over there. Thanks. So yeah, the great thing about this too is if you aren't able to test in a boat, say you're testing off a dock and you can see the bottom, you can record the water depth. Now, water depth, if you have a moving dock, is not really great. So you need a dock that's not moving around too much. But you'll see here that we have, can't see the bottom, you record the Secchi depth. You can see the bottom, you record the depth. This cord is 20 meters. So if you know your water body is deeper than that, this isn't really suitable for that purpose. All right. So in the front pocket as well, you'll have our field guide. This is really important. You're going to have this with you. And it has all the information that we're going through today. But it also has this quick start guide. It's got links. So there is a video. It's a 10-minute video that I created last year me in the snow at the beginning of last year. We'll be making a new video with the new case, but it still has the same water parameters, and it shows you the process of how you can go through it. Now, I've gotten really fast, and I can do all my tests in about 5 minutes, but most people take about 15, 20 minutes. So if you are concerned about this taking a long time, you can get really efficient, especially if you have 2 people with you. So yeah, so when you get your guide, make sure that you visit links. And if anything is unclear or you have questions, please send them to us, because one of the projects we have for this summer is getting experts to answer your questions. We think it's really important that scientists have the opportunity to communicate what's important about water testing with the community in a format that's accessible. So every page has, so you can see here the SECI depth. You can see how to and tips to make sure that you do things right. All right. Now, when you open your kit, you might be saying, oh, why did you give us a selfie stick? Well, we call it a reacher stick. And we have a little diagram on there that just reminds you to always rinse your sample cup 3 times in the water that you're testing. Really important that you rinse it, and try and rinse it a little bit away from where you're taking your sample. Now, it's actually a way that you can reach the water without having to be unsafe. Now, always make sure you tighten it here, otherwise it sort of flops around, but it means you can extend your reach. This is really great for older participants who might not be able to kneel down. In fast-moving streams, I highly recommend you turn the cup upside down. Otherwise, it might fall off. It definitely doesn't fall off this way. So we rinse the cup 3 times, and then we take our sample below the surface. So the first little inch of the water is actually a different zone, and we're actually taking it from the zone just below. So we want to make sure that we take our sample. All right, want to make me my sample. Okay. Now, depending on what you're doing, you can start with the first one, which is the test strips. We have 4 parameters: total chlorine, pH, alkalinity, and hardness. And you'll see in your field guide said, why am I testing for chlorine, and why are we using pool test strips? Well, we've tested over 15 types of test strips, and what we were looking for were ones that were affordable, accessible, meaning that you can go pick up replacements for this yourself, and they're not too expensive, and accurate. A lot of the test strips we tried weren't accurate. There's a little study online, and if you're interested in it, there is a link in your field guide to read more about the little mini study, but we're doing lots more comparison studies with some professionals to compare the test kit to professional equipment, just so that we can make sure that the data that you're collecting is useful for various people. So when you first get it, it's probably sealed. And this is Taylor Technologies. They produce another brand that uses the same type of pad, and it's called HTH. They're a sub-brand. So you can get HTH test strips from Walmart and Home Hardware, which is great. But I really like this one because the comparison on the back is really clear, and it's only the parameters that we want to test, whereas the ones from HTH also have cyanuric acid, which obviously we're not getting readings for. Now, a lot of people are like, why am I testing for chlorine? We don't know yet if the chlorine readings that you might be getting are relevant. We're conducting studies, but we're asking you to write it down for this year, just in case it turns out to be relevant. Some people in urban centers are getting readings, so we're wondering if it's correlated to road salts. in Ottawa, right near the water treatment plant, just downstream, they get readings as well. So if you get readings, it would be interesting to figure out what we think the source might be, and then investigate further as the research continues. So we shake a strip out, and we got the strip here. We dip it in for 2 seconds, and then we wait 20 seconds. So the reason we wait 20 seconds is that the pH pad is thicker than some of the other pads, so it just needs a second to go in. And then once we have our 20 seconds is up, we compare. So we hold the strip vertically, and then you compare the colors here. So in this case, chlorine, about 0.5. This is drinking water, so that makes sense. They always put a little bit of chlorine. pH is low, about 6.8. We're drinking Ottawa River water, so that makes sense as well. And so after you start testing for a while, you start to realize what unique chemistry makes sense for what you're testing, for what your drinking water is as well. And same with hardness. Hardness is 0, and that makes sense because the Ottawa River actually comes from the Canadian Shield, and not too much calcium or magnesium, such as a lake that had a limestone bottom, would be there. So yeah, so this makes sense for drinking water. All right. So we write those down. And then one of the things that I always do at the beginning is I go and hang my thermometer up in a tree. You want to make sure this is at least 1 meter above the ground. Don't hang it on you as a person. Your body heat will affect the temperature. You want to hang it in the shade and leave it there. So usually what we do is we hang it up at the beginning, do the rest of our tests, and then come back. Now, if you're on a boat, this might not be possible. So you can either try and find a shady spot. You can do it on your boat, or you can look at weather reports for your region and record that. But just make sure you write that down in the notes that that's what you've recorded. Okay, the next tool is our conductivity meter, and make sure that it's not a twist; it's a pull. And then you just press the top button once to turn on. And it's going to cycle through a few things. And then you can see it's getting a reading of 5. If you are ever getting a reading of 5 or lower, it's probably because you lifted it out of the water or you've left your cap on. So you should never be getting readings under 10 in any freshwater source. So that's a really good way to check. When we do this test, it's going to be recording. You can see the top number there. That is the conductivity in microsiemens. And then the bottom number is temperature. So it's really important that you do this test right away after you take your sample, or you put it in the water directly. The reason being, as soon as you take it out, the air is going to be changing the temperature of the water. So in this case, you can see at the top, I almost spilled water on my computer. Okay, you can see at the top there, it says US. Now, if you're in an urban center, if you ever see a decimal place in that top number, check the top right corner. If it says MS, that means it's changed units. You need to multiply your value by 1,000. So 1.32 would be 1,320. Urban streams often have higher than 1,000 readings, so you just want to make sure. So really be conscious of the decimal place. Conductivity is actually a measure of what can conduct electricity in water. So we're actually testing a lot of a combination of things. The obvious ones are road salts, but a lot of water chemistry things will increase readings. Things like calcium and other metals in the water, as well as nitrates and phosphates will affect this. So if you're having a pollution event, you're gonna see a spike. The cool thing about conductivity, though, is that every body of water, as I mentioned, has its own unique chemistry. So we're gonna be creating some baselines, and so you'll be able to say, is this good or bad? So for example, the Ottawa River is usually around 70 microsiemens, whereas the Rideau River is around 350 microsiemens. And then this drinking water has been treated, so 70 has gone up to 150. So it shows that they've added some stuff in to treat the water, which is fairly normal. And I ask kids all the time, like, is that good? Is it bad? Is the Rideau River more polluted? And they're like, yes, it's very polluted. And so we start talking about it, and it turns out because it's actually got such a smaller volume of water, it's touching the bottom more, which means more as a concentration, there's more minerals that are being absorbed. There's also has a limestone bottom rather than a Canadian Shield bottom. So again, these are factors that can influence. And one of the cool things I love doing is looking at the difference between a local stream and a lake nearby. And you're gonna notice that they have different chemistry. So we enter those two values together. The two values have a relationship. So make sure that you always write those together. All right. And then when you're done, oh yeah, to turn it off, press the top button. If you start pressing buttons and you're like, oh no, it's doing something crazy here, the fastest way to stop it is to just open the top and just move a battery until it turns it off. There you go. And then you can turn it back on. Once it's in a weird mode, I find it really difficult. There is the manual there, but it's written in not very accessible language, and that seems to be the best way. You also have an envelope. I don't have one here, but you'll have an envelope in there, and it says that this is your calibration solution for next year. You can have a look at it, but it's something that we can do together, and there is a video on that online on how to calibrate your conductivity meter. These hold their calibration really well. We've had a couple chemists that have done long-term reproducibility, and they're holding their calibration well for an entire season. So unless you're starting to get random readings, we're just gonna calibrate every spring. One of the reasons we don't use a pH meter is because they don't hold their calibration, and you'd have to do it weekly, and it's quite complicated. You have to do it with 3 different samples, and it's very expensive. So that's why we're using test strips rather than the meter. All right, the last thing here is dissolved oxygen. Now, dissolved oxygen is often a very, very expensive, finicky probe that costs thousands of dollars, and you need to calibrate it daily or weekly, depending on where you're from. And then we found this kit, and it's quite user-friendly, and it's been really accurate compared to the probes. And we had one conservation lady who actually used it to make sure that her probe was calibrated correctly. So it's quite cool to see this interaction between citizen science and professionals, which I think is really amazing. So the important thing is don't leave this open. You want to make sure when you store it closed, just to keep your reference guide as long as possible. But you can pull your reference guide out, and that's going to make it easier to compare. So we always take it out. Take out one of these ampoules. Now I know I'm going really fast, but you do have your guides, and there's individual videos for each of these parameters too online, but I just find it's good to go over everything together. Okay, and then you have, you can see there's like a little white line. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? Near the top. This is a weak point in the glass. So this is a vacuum sealed with a dye. It's not toxic, but don't drink it or get it in your eyes and mouth. But yeah, it's not going to harm you. And that's a weak point in the glass, and it's vacuum sealed. And then you have this little sample cup, and you're going to notice that there's little ridges in the bottom there. You can see those there. So when I actually put my my ampoule, that's what I call it, ampoule, in here, I'm going to put it in one of the ridges right there. I usually put it in the one closest to me, and I just pull it towards myself. So I'm going to put a little water in here. And I put it in, and you're going to see how little effort it is. So I'm just going to pull it. That's it. Okay, so it filled up. I'm going to take it out, and then I'm going to let the bubble go up and down 2 times. Yeah. And then we give you a 2-minute timer. So set your timer. So usually what I do when I do my tests, I do them in an order so that while this is developing, I do my other tests, and then I read this at the end. We've tested it, and it keeps its color. It has to take 2 minutes to develop, but you probably have about 10 minutes to do the reading. So while we're waiting, does anyone have any questions so far? I'll watch the thing. So in your bag here, yeah. So we deal with disposal. So to collect your test strips, you're gonna put them in your little case, back, and you're gonna take out one of the Whirl-Pack bags. I'll explain a bit about the Whirl-Pack bags as well. So in here are these things called Whirl-Pack bags, and these are sterile things to collect a sample. So if you notice an issue and you're like, I don't have a sterile container because you're using your container for your testing, you can use one of these to collect your data. So the important thing for all of this is that we don't contaminate our sample. So you want to make sure when you're not putting your fingers in your water sample, but especially if you're taking a test, you want to make sure that you're not contaminating it. So there's a little rip line there. And then there's these 2 little pull tabs here. And then you can scoop the water up from the water. And then you actually can flip. I think I can do it. I'm gonna do it. So you might want to practice this before you do it with something toxic. So I'm rolling it down. And then you can flip it if you want, like that. And then it ties it up like that. So that's to take a sample to the lab. The reason we include this, we don't expect you to be taking samples to the lab very often, but sometimes you're in a situation and it's going to disappear before the officials can get there, and it's nice to have a backup. The other thing I always suggest if you are taking a sample, to videotape yourself taking it, and then also write on the label before you take your sample, because otherwise it's really difficult to do that. Oh, I don't know. So we actually use one of these bags as our disposal for our dissolved oxygen ampoules at the end too. Want to make sure that we keep our environment clean. So our 2 minutes are up. You see? And then what we actually do is we move. I like to start from the bottom and move up until you find the right spot and the right color. It can be really hard to compare in sunlight. And we ask that you try and go sampling with a friend. And especially for this one, you have to agree. The 2 of you have to agree. And what that makes you do is actually take the time to go between. So,
Say about 9.
Yeah, so it's between 8 and 10. So we'll record 9. And that makes sense for where we are. This water has been out. It's got a lot of oxygen in it. We're more looking for the range. So low range, you're gonna expect that in ponds and really stagnant water. Mid-range, if it gets really warm. And then for cold water species, they really need lots of oxygen. And then we put it in here. Now you're gonna notice the little tip is still in there. Make sure you can see. I pour it out really slowly, so don't just chuck this back in the water. Pour it out really slowly. Be careful, it is glass. Use your hands to filter, and then I just use my little thing and I just tap it until it comes out. Well, yeah, that's the one annoying thing about the kit, but the benefits of the dissolved oxygen is so awesome compared to the other options we had, and it actually is really fun. You're gonna feel quite satisfied when you do it. If you're working with kids, usually I suggest, 8 or 9 and up. If you're testing with a kid that's younger, they can be in charge of the timer, and they can help with color comparing, and they can do the conductivity meter. But breaking the ampoule is more for older kids. All right, cool. So that's the main kit. When you pack it up, we don't have too much time, so I just want to show people how we quickly look at samples, locations. But Najiba is going to be around, so if you have any questions, you can email her. As you do more, you're going to notice more things that you have questions about, and we're going to be putting on a webinar, not a webinar, FAQ to answer questions. You can also join our Facebook group. There's testers from last year and the year before there, and they're very knowledgeable. They've been doing it for a couple years now, and they're a great resource, and we love to share photos and stories too. So if you do fun things and you want to share stories, then we'd love to see it. So when you go to the app, so you're gonna have your profile. I'm just gonna go to my profile. And you can see all your stuff there. And you can see some of my latest observations. So when we're choosing sites, you can see that there's a common theme. Deepest point is a quite common one. So when you're looking at your lake, you're looking for the deepest point. If you have a depth finder, then you can do that. But we might be able to help you find those things as well. So you're gonna look at, this is an example of our lake association, and you can see the example of the sample locations. So what we have here is a stream that goes between the two lakes. So we wanna see if Lake Gerard is a pollution source possibly for Lake McGlashan. So really important to test that as an input source. So finding a spot in the center of the stream right there is great. The other location for us there, which is not part of our official plan, but it's a great location. It's off the end of our dock. The reason we have this as another location is because it's a great place for my parents' grandchildren to go and actually participate in water testing on a regular basis, so they can do their weekly tests there. Then we have our deep point here, and then we have another deep point over here. So this is another area. There's a lot of cottages around there. They're very concerned about it, so that they can test there as well. So we just started testing there last year. So one of the things that we're looking for you guys to do is 15 observations. And if you're doing monthly testing, that would mean you have to do 4 sites 4 times. So 4 months at 4 sites. So in my case, my 4 sites would be here, but I also have some sites in downtown Ottawa that I test as well at my local park and whatnot. Now you can see here's a really great example of Don Ross. He's been testing with us for 2 years. He's tested in a stream near a boat launch. The reason why that's important, boat launches can be a source of pollution, and it's really good to understand a really clean site versus which we call a reference site, and compare that to a site that we believe is having problems. So you can see here he's entered in his conductivity, his temperature, his water depth, and then he's looking at phosphates as well. And you can see in his notes that he has included a lot of great details about the weather, something that has changed for that site, you know, personal things, who participated, any animals that are there, and then he noticed this slime. So you can see his slimy pictures. Pretty gross. So that's it. So if you are concerned about choosing your sample spots, what you can do is you can actually just click on here and just create a location, and send us links to those locations, and we can look at them together as a group, and give more hints on what you might want to consider, and if we think it's a good sample site. So really think about why you want to sample in those locations, because that's really important. So I'm just going to show you how to add an observation quickly. We'll be inviting you to our group for this program. So each program has its own group, but you can see that you can be associated with multiple groups. As you can see, I'm associated with lots of groups, but what it does is it changes the form depending on what group you select. And then you can change the observed on date. So if you've done it yesterday, you can change that. And then you can enter in all your details for your tests. If your Secchi depth is bottom visible, then you select the bottom visible and you can enter in the depth here. There's also information you can add on wildlife and invasive species. If you want to learn more about invasive species, we're going to be looking at them a little bit more later in the summer, but we feel like we're going to start with the water chemistry and work on from there. And we really encourage you to add photos and notes. So we don't have too much time left, so I wanted to open it up now to some time for questions. If any of you guys have some questions, now would be a great time. We're just starting this program up, and we're getting people on board. But having questions is totally normal, and but we're here to help and support you in getting you started. Anyone have any questions? Oh, wait. Is there anything you want to ask?
Oh, there's a question.
Oh, there's a question? What happens if I do the test on the next day? Does it always have to be the day on the magnet? That's a very good question. Do you want to answer?
Yeah, sure. So there's on the magnet, you will. So we recommend to do it on the Sunday, the ones on the bold. But if you can't do it that day, Sunday morning is recommended time. But if you're not available that day, there are alternative dates. So it's Saturday, Friday, Saturday. So you can do it on those days as well. But if you're doing weekly testing, you can do that every weekend, or you can pick a date. Right?
Yeah, so if you're able to do it as part of your work, for example, we have a few of the conservation groups. They do it on either the Friday or the Monday. What we're trying to do though is we're trying to create a snapshot of a specific time, and the best way to do that is to try and coordinate people across those dates. But we realize with people's schedules, it doesn't always work out. And if you have lots of sites, then you can't do them all at 10 a.m. on Sunday. So I usually do mine over the Saturday, Sunday. But we have the Raisin Region Conservation Authorities. I think they do it on the Friday or the Monday on the date. But yeah, again, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending out some tips on creating your testing plan. There are some beginning guides, but we really would like you guys to specify your plan for the summer. How many sites you want to do, how often you want to do them, and what day you plan on doing them. We know that things change and sometimes it's not possible, but the more we plan at the beginning, the better we're able to succeed.
It's good to be consistent. So if you know that you're not available Saturday, Sunday, you want to do on Monday, it's good to be consistent.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that we're doing, we really like to get people to test as much as if they get excited about doing lots of testing. We really want to reward the people that take that extra step to do lots of monitoring. So we'll have some little, we'll have some notes, but basically, I think it's, what did I say, the first 2 or first 3 would get resupplies? We have to check. It's either the first 2 or the first 3 groups that do 30 tests before the summer's out. We will give you some resupplies as part of this program to help you keep going. We do also give discounts on resupplies, and we try and really give participants part of this program an extra leg up to continue testing in the long term. WWF are really keen for you guys to keep testing over terms. I'll try and apply for more money to resupply you for next year, but it's not guaranteed. But hopefully their commitment means that I'll be able to do that. But obviously as a nonprofit, it's funding is always a difficult thing. Darcy says, is there a preference one site or multiple sites? The preference is for multiple sites for the monthly testing. We want you guys to do at least 15 observations over the season, which can go until October, depending on when you lose access to your waterway. But if you're doing one site on a weekly basis, then that is fine too. If it's a really important site, I would suggest that you do 2 sites though. One as your reference site, the site that you think is more pristine, and then one is your troubled site, the one that you're actually testing. And so you can have those that way to compare the 2.
Do you want to speak just briefly about WWF's data deficient watershed?
Yes, yes. So this program is because WWF have found that we're not collecting or sharing data about our waterways. So you guys are part of data deficient sub-watersheds, which I think is really awesome. To fill those data gaps can take a couple years because we can't just take 1 year. Like last year was it flooding last? No, 2 years ago was flooding. Last year here in Ontario was very hot. So you need multiple years to be able to say for sure what a picture does. So we're just starting the process of creating more capacity in your watershed, and we also want to help you share your data with local regional collectors of data. So Najiba will be in contact with you to help with that. We've already contacted a couple in Ontario and in BC. We have some connections with that are interested, but we'll help you with that as well. So the idea being, how can we make sure that your efforts, you guys are going to be working hard at collecting this data, we want to make sure that your efforts are as useful as possible. All right, we have 2 minutes left. Is there any final questions or thoughts? I hope you guys are as excited as I am. I mean, most of our programs we've just run in Ontario, and so it's very exciting for us to be pretty much across the country for this program. I think that it's going to be really cool to see your observations come in and just see how different water bodies are and different ecosystems are, because Canada's pretty impressive. Do you have any final? No? Can we contact you again after you use the kit for the first time to recap and make sure I'm doing everything right? For sure. We are actually holding refreshers for existing test kitters as well, so we can share that link with you guys as well. So these are people that have been testing for a couple of years, and we're just going to go through the kit, or you can come back, or we can have a video call. I think that's totally fine. Yeah, we're really keen to support you guys as much as possible. Is shoreline sampling okay if you don't have access to a boat? What do you recommend? Yes, that's totally fine. And that's one of the reasons why we give you the selfie stick. If you're wading in, you might disturb the water, and you might the sediment might mix in. So we really like to make sure that you use your selfie stick when you're doing shoreline rather than wading in. If you have to wade in, you want to sample upstream from where you are, especially in streams. That means that the stuff that you're disturbing is behind you. So yes, you can sample inshore. Obviously the Secchi disc is not going to be that useful, but if you do get a chance to use the boat, then you can. Last questions. Are you going to share the webinar online? Yes, this will be recorded, but as I mentioned before, all of the test kit components, they each have their own page. I'm actually going to show you that really quick. I know I don't want to take over time here, but 2 seconds. If you go to waterrangers.ca, we're just in the process of a redesign. So if you notice anything, you're like, I don't understand that, just tell us, because it's your feedback that helps us. So if you go under Learn, Water Test Parameters, these are all the parameters that you can test for. For example, conductivity, what is it? Here's the research that we're working on. Why is it important? What does it mean? Common values. And then we have some expert videos, and we're going to be doing more of that. And then how to use it is here, as well as me on the lake, and calibration. So that's for next spring, and then more information. Stop share. Okay, so we're gonna let you go because I really appreciate that it's the middle of the day for most people. But please feel free to email Najiba or contact us, and we have all these opportunities to learn more from you and make sure that we can support people. So thanks very much, guys. Bye. Stop recording.